Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to guide you through this one, because we are diving into an unbelievable true story that literally defied scientific explanation for years. We're going to break down exactly what happened using the facts, the data, and the real-world investigations right here as we go. So let's just dive straight into it.
Okay, I want you to genuinely imagine this scenario for a second. Picture this. You're just walking down the street, maybe feeling the morning sun on your face as you head into work, you're chatting with a friend, or maybe you're just sitting on a bench eating lunch. And then, without any warning whatsoever, your body just completely shuts down. You fall asleep. And, we aren't talking about a quick power nap for a few minutes here, or even sleeping away a lazy Sunday afternoon. We are talking about falling into a deep, unshakable slumber that lasts for days at a time.
I mean, it sounds like science fiction, right? It sounds exactly like the plot of some apocalyptic horror movie where a mysterious force just takes over the world. Except, this actually happened. And what makes this truly terrifying, and really the whole reason we're doing a deep dive into it today, is that this wasn't just an isolated medical anomaly for one unlucky person with a rare condition. No, this happened to an entire village. A collective, spontaneous plunge into unconsciousness that left the entire medical world completely baffled.
Section 1. The Ordinary Village.
So to really understand this mystery, we first have to understand the setting. We're traveling over to the vast, wind-swept grasslands of Kazakhstan, specifically to a tiny village called Kalachi. Now, Kalachi was home to just a few hundred people. It was quiet, peaceful, and honestly pretty much forgettable. For decades, absolutely nothing unusual happened there. Families farmed the land, kids walked to school, life just moved at this slow, predictable pace. Until one completely ordinary day. Out of nowhere, someone simply fell asleep. Now at first, you can kind of imagine the reaction from their friends and family. Everyone just assumed it was exhaustion, maybe it was a bad case of the flu, or actually scratch that, they probably just thought it was sheer overwork. You wouldn't immediately jump to the conclusion that something sinister was happening, right? You just think the poor person desperately needed some rest.
But the thing is, this sickness didn't just linger. It escalated, and it escalated fast, striking people right in the middle of active daily tasks. Another person collapsed, and then another. Soon you had children falling asleep right in the middle of class, literally hitting their desks mid-sentence. And the stakes got incredibly high when drivers started falling asleep, completely unresponsive, behind the wheel of moving vehicles. I mean, that is a massive public safety hazard. People were collapsing mid-conversation, dropping cups of coffee, just instantly gone. Some victims slept for 2 solid days, while others were completely out cold for almost an entire week. No one knew when it was going to strike next, what was triggering it, or who the next victim would even be. That sheer unpredictability turned everyday life into a constant state of dread.
And get this, the terror didn't even end when they woke up. The psychological toll was arguably way worse than the physical one. Victims recounted these completely harrowing experiences upon finally opening their eyes, describing vivid, terrifying hallucinations. They saw flying horses. They were talking to faces that literally weren't there. When they finally woke up from these multi-day slumbers, many couldn't even remember what had happened to them at all. Their short-term memory was just wiped clean. So instead, their minds filled the gaps with severe, bizarre imagery. They remembered entire conversations that never actually happened in reality. It was absolute psychological chaos for the victims and just heartbreaking for the families who had to watch them suffer.
Section 2. Searching for answers.
Now you can imagine the absolute panic that was quickly spreading through Kalachi. People were desperate, terrified to even close their eyes at night. The government and the international scientific community, they quickly took notice. This had become an active, terrifying medical mystery. Doctors, toxicologists, scientists, they all rushed into the village to figure out what the heck was happening before the sickness struck again. And they approached this like a true crime investigation, testing all the logical suspects. Could it be a new, undiscovered virus? Well, they ran extensive blood panels. What about a poisoned water supply from agricultural runoff? They checked water samples from every single well. Now, the village did sit near some abandoned Soviet-era uranium mines, so naturally they thought, okay, maybe it's radiation poisoning. They ran brain scans on the victims, checked the whole environment with Geiger counters, tested the dirt, the whole shebang. Some locals, out of sheer desperation, even started believing it was an ancient curse or something supernatural. But the result of every single scientific test? Completely normal. The blood, the water, the initial air samples, everything looked perfectly fine. There was zero trace of heavy metals, absolutely no viral load, and background radiation was well within safe limits.
As the months turned into years, the panic reached a boiling point.
The mystery was only growing deeper, and over 100 residents, which, to put that into perspective, is nearly a quarter of the entire village, had experienced these sudden, terrifying sleep attacks. Whole families were being taken down one by one, and no explanation seemed to fit the massive amount of evidence they were gathering. Every single hypothesis led to a dead end, leaving the scientific community completely stuck, and a village living in constant fear of their own biology.
Section 3. The Invisible Danger. Finally, after years of intense debate, constant dead ends, and frantic investigations, researchers spotted a subtle pattern. It was a meteorological anomaly that tied these completely random events together. The sleeping episodes almost always happened under very specific weather conditions. Let's walk through the exact sequence of events that led to this massive breakthrough. Remember those abandoned uranium mines we talked about? Well, while they weren't poisoning people with radiation like everyone initially feared, the decaying wood and stagnant water deep inside those shafts were slowly releasing gases, primarily carbon monoxide. Under normal circumstances, this gas would just float up and dissipate into the atmosphere. No big deal. But under certain specific weather conditions, specifically a phenomenon known as a thermal inversion, where a layer of cold air gets trapped under a layer of warm air, the atmosphere basically acted like a giant lid. It trapped that toxic air right over the village. So the carbon monoxide would build up in the surrounding area, pushing out the breathable air and causing oxygen levels in the village to just plummet drastically.
The absolute crucial turning point in the investigation was understanding this exact biological mechanism. Oxygen deficiency, also known as cerebral hypoxia. The villagers weren't being poisoned by a mysterious chemical in the traditional sense. Their brains simply weren't receiving enough oxygen to stay awake. When the human brain detects a severe drop in oxygen, it panics and goes straight into survival mode. It shuts down non-essential functions, forcing the body into a deep, comatose sleep, just to preserve core life systems. So the villagers were drifting off without even realizing they were effectively suffocating. And those terrifying hallucinations, the flying horses and the phantom faces, that was literally the biological result of a brain desperately struggling to reboot. As the weather shifted and oxygen slowly returned to the area, the sudden rush of oxygen back to a hypoxic brain caused neurons to misfire wildly, resulting in those severe, waking nightmares.
Section 4. What happened next? So once this invisible culprit was finally identified, the resolution was, well, it was both tragic and necessary. Knowing that the very air they breathed could turn against them at literally any moment based on a simple shift in the wind, many families just fled Kalachi. Eventually, the government stepped in and officially relocated the remaining residents. Today, the village of Kalachi is basically a ghost town. You know, when we think of dangerous places, we usually picture these massive visible threats, right? Volcanoes erupting, massive Category 5 storms, devastating earthquakes that tear the ground apart. We know to fear what we can see. But the tragic resolution of Kalachi really reminds us of the profound invisible dangers out there. Nature had quietly, seamlessly changed the atmosphere itself. It wasn't an ancient curse or some contagious supervirus. It was just the weather and the earth conspiring to slowly turn off the lights in their minds.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other extraordinary mysteries are hiding in perfectly ordinary places, just waiting to be understood? Sometimes, the world's strangest events aren't fiction at all. They are just complex puzzles waiting for the right scientific lens to decode them. If you love exploring unbelievable true stories that sound completely impossible but are firmly grounded in fact, make sure you subscribe to Miss Strange Truth. Because as we saw today with the sleeping village of Kalachi, sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.